Hello crafty friends, it's Kari back again on the channel to share a really fun technique using a background stamp. Today I'm going to be using the math background stamp, and I'm going to bring in a few other stamp sets like this one right here. I'm going to be using one of these magical girls, and then I'm also going to be using the sentiment from this set right here, and I will have everything linked below so you can easily take a look at them. But this is a favorite technique of mine for using background stamps, and it's a little bit magical because all you have to do to transition from color to color is soften the edges. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm positioning my background stamp here in the MISTI, and I have a sticky mat to hold my paper down, and the magnet is holding down that sticky mat. That's so I can stamp the entire background on my panel. And I've chosen a variety of bright colored inks and one darker sapphire, kind of a purpley blue ink. And I'm going to stamp these out in a kind of diagonal gradient way. Now this one didn't stamp too dark, but there's the trick right there. Did you see what I did? I took my cloth and I blurred those edges. So when you put down a color of ink, and then by the way, I'm going to transition to the next color here. So I cleaned my stamp because I didn't want the yellow to pick up that pinky peach color that was on there. So I did clean that, but let me show you again on the next color because yellow is kind of hard to see in the video. And it's such a light color that I didn't even blur the edges on this one. So the next color I'm going in with is a green color, and watch this. I'm going to take my rag, and it's a microfiber cloth actually, and I'm just going to blur those edges so that when we transition to the next color, it's going to be nice and smooth. See that? So I blurred the edges, and now we can move to the next color. You might have noticed that I haven't cleaned off my stamp since I stamped the lightest color, or since I stamped the yellow. That's because each of these colors is getting progressively darker, and so I can just easily stamp them on without worrying about that ink transferring. The yellow I was a little worried about. Now I am stamping this rather quickly, so you might not notice, but I do take that rag, blur those edges, and then I stamp the next color, and that's what helps it transition really well to the next color. Now this is a very darker blue, a lot darker than the last one, so I blurred the edges on this one as well, and now I'm going to stamp the lighter blue again just to get that nice transition. So each time you stamp, you're going to want to take your cloth and blur the edges just a little bit. And here we go, there's our result. Now this looks pretty on its own, but I do go in with inks and I ink blend a little of the same color right over the top. I don't add any extra ink to my brush, I just use what's on there. If you need a little extra color though, you can go in to your ink pad and look at that. It's a nice transition from color to color. And then the background is also that. So it's not just a stark white background. And I love that. Now I've already colored up this little magical girl here. And I'm going to use this sentiment. But I'll stamp it off onto a white piece of cardstock. And then I decided, you know, she needs a little desk also. So I'm going to bring in another stamp set in just a minute to bring in that desk. But there is our sentiment, and it says, what matters most is believing in yourself. And I think that's true when you're trying to do math. Is anybody with me on this? So this is the set I'm going to bring in for the little desk, and I'm going to stamp it on that same cardstock. And I'm using for this one Memento Tuxedo black ink because it's a really good ink for Copic coloring. So I'm using that ink to stamp this down, and then I'll color up that desk. And I do love mixing and matching stamp sets. I think it's a really fun thing to do. So this stamp set that the desk came from is the It's All Relative stamp set, and that's usually what I might think to use the math background with. But today we've got a little smart magical girl who can do math just as well. So she is the star of the show today. I'm just going to quickly color up all of those books, and I'm using the same colors of Copic markers that I used on that magical girl. And then for the desk, I'm going to use some E50 colors, just like I colored her hair. I'm making the desk a little bit darker, and I'm going to go in with the darkest E57, blend that out with an E55, and then I'll come in with an E53 to blend that out, and then I'll go back through all the colors once again just to get a really good blend. You can see how I like to Copic color, and this is a larger area, so just have to be a little patient with making sure that all of the colors are blending nicely. So after I went in with the light color, I could tell that I wanted more of that medium shade to come through. So I'm going to go through once again with the medium and then the light. And that's looking pretty good right there, and it'll soften up a little bit as it dries. And I'm just going to cut this out with my scissors. I do not have a matching die for this. I'm not even sure if there's a matching die available. I will double check on that. And if there is, I can link it below as well. So I just fussy cut that, and now I'm going to add the sentiment to a rectangle of cardstock, and I used kind of a green, like a darker green, because it was going to go right over that green section. And I'm going to put that right about there, just like that. And you could use a frame around this, but I just love that background going all the way to the edge. So I'm going to leave it as it is. I'll glue down that sentiment with the frame. Next, I'm going to pop up the girl with a little foam adhesive. And I'm even adding some to her wand to make sure that it doesn't fall down. But you're going to see later on, I'm going to fix that. Because I decided to also pop up the desk with some foam adhesive. So look, I'm adding the girl right there. Then I'm going to add some foam to the desk, and then I end up having to kind of slip that behind her wand, and the wand was popping up a little too much. So I removed the foam from that wand and instead added some liquid adhesive down to that desk so that they were the same level. And now I'll add the whole panel to our card base. And I like to line up the corners and then make sure everything is just even with all the edges. And for the inside, I thought I should add some sentiments to the inside, but I am also taking a light gray Copic marker and adding a bit of a shadow beneath her and beneath the desk. And so that looks really great like that. And for this, I thought this would be perfect to add one of the personalities stamp sets. And the one I'm using here is this one with the bird, and I'm going to build up a sentiment that I think is perfect for the inside of this card, just to give a little bit of positive reinforcement to this little mathematician. So I'm using the large intelligent word and then 3 other descriptive words, and I'll stamp this out on the inside using some VersaFine Onyx black ink, because that is a really nice ink for stamping out sentiments and getting a nice crisp black impression. So I'll put that in my MISTI. I wanted to put another magnet down just to make sure that I was getting the entire panel kind of held down so it didn't pop up on me. So now I can ink that up with the black ink, stamp that down. And it says, "You are brainy, bright, brilliant, intelligent." And I think that's a really nice thing to send to someone. Just for a little encouragement. What do you think? So I really liked that for the inside of this card. And there is our card all finished. I think she's so cute. I love that math background. If you didn't see the last video I did, I will link it also here for you. But I hope you enjoyed this version today as well, nice and colorful. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll have a lot more inspiration to come. Until then, happy crafting. Bye-bye.